Welcome to First Sleep Aid, calm stories to help you unwind, learn, and fall asleep. From true crime to curious facts and thoughtful ideas, always softly spoken. Subscribe now and take a deep breath. You're in good hands.
Welcome. This deep dive takes us to Frankfurt Höchst. To a day, back in March 1998, a day that still resonates with a really disquieting silence.
Yeah.
We're looking into the unsolved murder of 13-year-old Tristan Bru. And despite, well, a truly massive investigation, the questions just hang there, still unanswered.
It's one of those cases, isn't it? It really stays with you, I think, precisely because of that silence. Such a violent end to a young life. And yet, so few real answers.
Our sources, they paint a picture of Tristan as a quiet boy, quite introspective.
13 years old.
Yeah, just 13. Living with his father then. His mother had sadly died by suicide a few years earlier, back in '95.
Which must have been incredibly difficult for him.
Absolutely. He seemed to find some peace in nature, often alone, near the local stream, the bach, or in the parks.
Yeah, a young person maybe observing the world with a sort of quiet thoughtfulness. His teachers, they mentioned he was intelligent, polite, a regular student at his school, the Walter Kolb Schule.
But also, yeah, somewhat withdrawn. Seemed to prefer his own company sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
So let's try and trace the known movements on that specific day. March 26, 1998.
Okay.
Tristan apparently left school early.
Mm-hmm.
Around 1:30 p.m., he
Yeah.
reported having back pain.
Right, and establishing that precise sequence. It becomes so crucial in cases like this. Every verified moment, every potential turning point.
Exactly. We do have a confirmed sighting not long after that at a local pharmacy, a little after 2, about 2:15 p.m.
He was picking up some medication.
Yes, and this part is the key. It was actually captured on surveillance footage, so that's a concrete detail we can hold on to.
That visual confirmation,
Yeah.
it really anchors you, doesn't it, to a specific moment in time in what becomes a sea of, well, conjecture later on. We know definitely he was there, alive, at 2:15.
Then things get fuzzier. The unconfirmed sightings start. There were reports of him near the Höchst train station, maybe by the Liederbach stream again.
But these are less certain.
Right. Human memory, time,
Mm-hmm.
it can blur things.
Unconfirmed sightings, they offer possibilities, of course, but also there's just so much potential for error, a fleeting resemblance, maybe, a trick of the light.
The last confirmed sighting we have places Tristan on a bench near the underpass, the Liederbach underpass, where he was later found.
Okay.
Another student, a boy about his age, saw him there and saw a man approach him. This was sometime before 3:00 p.m. This interaction, it feels like the last solid thread.
And that interaction, it carries such immense weight, doesn't it? Who was this man? What were they talking about? What happened in those moments right after? So many questions just from that one sighting.
Then the discovery. It was around 3:20 p.m. A group of students, classmates maybe, found Tristan's body inside that Liederbach underpass.
And the scene they found, the details are just stark, very disturbing.
He'd suffered a severe cut to his throat, and there was extensive mutilation.
The violence is undeniable, but it's the specific nature of that violence that's so deeply unsettling.
Soft tissue had been removed from his thighs, his buttocks, and the way it was done. Forensic reports describe the incisions as precise, almost surgical.
That precision, it suggests something beyond just rage, doesn't it? It speaks to a disturbing level of control, maybe even, as you say, a kind of anatomical knowledge. Surgical skill, perhaps.
And there were no signs that Tristan had fought back. No defensive wounds were found on him.
Which suggests a very sudden, overwhelming attack.
Right.
One where he had almost no chance to react.
Seems that way. And despite the horrific mutilation, investigators found no evidence of sexual assault. No semen, nothing like that.
Which is another layer of strangeness, given the nature of the injuries.
Adding to the puzzle, his shoes were missing. And his backpack. Neither was recovered at the scene.
The missing items. Why those specific things? A backpack and shoes. It just adds another layer of mystery.
And there's one more detail about the scene itself. Tristan's body wasn't just left. It was laid out on his back. His arms placed symmetrically.
Like an intentional act.
Exactly. It seems deliberate.
That detail, it really suggests a kind of staging. A purposeful presentation. It hints at a particular mindset, maybe. Something very cold, very calculated.
Forensics determined that sharp, very specific tools were used. Professional grade knives, perhaps, or anatomical ones.
Consistent with the precise cuts.
Yes. They also concluded that both the killing and the mutilation happened right there, at the scene, very soon after death. The blood patterns, the evidence at the site confirmed this.
So the underpass itself was the location, start to finish.
The investigation that kicked off after this, it was huge, just immense.
Understandably.
Over 16,000 people were questioned eventually. Interpol got involved, Europol too. Involvement at, well, every level you can imagine.
Right.
The case was even featured on Aktenzeichen XY Ungelöst, the big German true crime show.
The sheer scale of that response.
Yeah.
It just reflects the profound shock, I think, and the absolute determination to find answers. They threw everything at it.
A really key aspect early on was the eyewitness accounts. Several people reported seeing a man nearby around that time.
The man seen with Tristan.
Possibly the same one, yeah. Described as looking sort of unkempt, maybe in his 30s or 40s. Longish blonde hair, a thin face, wearing a green military-style jacket, and carrying a sports bag.
This description, it led directly to the composite sketch, right? That image that became so incredibly well-known, it really became the face of the search.
And that young witness we mentioned, the boy Tristan's age, who actually saw this man speaking with Tristan just before 3 o'clock. His account was obviously crucial for creating that image.
That brief encounter, it remains such a source of intense frustration, I imagine. If only we knew what was said. If only that man could have been identified.
But he wasn't, despite that sketch being one of the most widely distributed in post-war Germany, apparently. He was never credibly identified. He just vanished.
And that failure, it opens up so many possibilities, doesn't it? Did he leave Frankfurt immediately? Maybe leave the country? Were the witnesses' memories maybe not quite accurate, despite their best efforts? It's a huge stumbling block in the case.
Hundreds upon hundreds of potential suspects eventually gave DNA samples. No matches were ever found.
None.
Investigators collected over 23,000 data points, pieces of information. They cross-referenced psychiatric records. They reanalyzed the evidence again and again over the years, using newer techniques as they became available.
That relentless pursuit of a DNA link, it really speaks to the hope that science could break the case open, but the continued absence of a match, it just deepens the enigma, really.
Then, months later, Tristan's backpack was found. Remember, it was missing from the scene.
Right. Where did it turn up?
In a forest near a town called Niedernhausen, which is some distance away.
Oh, okay, so not close by at all.
No, inside. His school supplies were still there. But tragically, forensic teams couldn't find any usable traces on it. No DNA, no fingerprints that led anywhere.
So the recovery of the backpack, miles away,
Wow.
it just generates more questions, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Why there? What's the connection to that specific forest?
Exactly. And his shoes. They were never found. Still missing today.
Another persistent shadow in the case. Just gone.
There's just such an undeniable eeriness surrounding this crime. The brutality, yes, of course. But when you combine it with that precision we talked about, it feels so calculated.
Yeah.
Yet, no clear motive ever surfaced. None at all.
It suggests such a disturbing level of intent, a very specific purpose, perhaps, and of the lack of a struggle.
Right.
It really does hint at a sudden, overwhelming force, or maybe even some kind of misplaced trust initially. We just don't know.
And those missing items, the shoes, the backpack found later, what was their significance? Were they just discarded randomly? Or was there a more deliberate reason for taking them, for leaving the backpack where it was found?
Well, one might speculate, and it is just speculation,
Yeah.
that maybe they were taken to try and mislead investigators, to suggest a different timeline, perhaps, or a different location for part of the crime.
Or maybe.
Or perhaps their meaning was purely personal to the perpetrator, something symbolic to them that we just can't understand from the outside.
And the composite sketch, that face seen everywhere. How could such a widely circulated image just fail to generate a single credible lead that panned out?
It's possible. Maybe the individual just had no prior run-ins with the law, no record for police to match the sketch to. Or, as we said, maybe they left the region very quickly, permanently.
Or the sketch wasn't quite right.
That's always possible, too. Witness recollections, even from very confident witnesses, they can be flawed, especially trying to recall details of a face seen briefly, potentially under stressful circumstances.
Over the years, several theories have naturally been considered by investigators, and, well, by the public too. One is that unsettling idea of a psychopath, someone with specific anatomical knowledge, given the surgical nature of the mutilation.
The precision. It certainly points towards someone with a familiarity with anatomy, or at least with using sharp instruments very carefully. However, investigators looked really hard, and they could never connect Tristan or anyone around him to individuals known to have those skills or work in those professions.
Wow.
That link, It's just remained elusive.
Another theory floated is a spontaneous act of violence,
Hmm?
maybe by a local stranger who was deeply disturbed.
That's a possibility, of course, a sudden, impulsive, violent act. But then you come back to the precision, the almost methodical way the mutilation was carried out. It seems somewhat at odds with a purely impulsive, chaotic attack.
Yeah, it feels contradictory.
And again, where did this person go? If they were local, how did they just disappear without anyone noticing anything afterwards, without leaving any other trace?
There has also been speculation, and it's really important we mark this clearly as speculation, because there's no hard proof.
Absolutely.
Speculation about an organized crime element, or even some kind of ritualistic aspect to the crime.
Yeah.
The way the body was positioned, it does raise those kinds of questions for some people.
Yes, this is where we absolutely must tread carefully. We're entering the realm of conjecture here,
Yeah.
based purely on the unusual details of the crime scene itself.
Right.
But it is really vital to state again, no concrete evidence, no corroborating details, nothing connecting this to any known ritualistic practices or organized groups has ever surfaced in this investigation.
Okay. Then there's the theory of a transient offender, someone just passing through, made more plausible, perhaps, by the proximity of the Hooks train station.
That's a very plausible scenario, logistically. Someone arriving, committing the crime, and leaving quickly. Having no local ties would explain the lack of local connections, the unidentified DNA, if any was left that wasn't the victim's.
But it still leaves that huge question.
Why Tristan? Why that specific boy, on that specific day, in that specific place? It comes back to that every time.
So many questions just left hanging. Why this specific brutal mutilation? But apparently no sexual assault.
Yeah.
What was the perpetrator's focus? What was their actual intent?
It suggests a very particular and deeply disturbing motivation. The focus seems to have been quite specifically on the removal of certain tissues, almost like harvesting, rather than a crime driven by sexual impulse. It's very strange.
And how? How could there be no witnesses to the actual attack itself, or even just to the perpetrator leaving the underpass afterwards? It's secluded, yes, but not completely isolated. People do use that area.
It is unsettling to think about. Such a violent act, happening essentially in public, albeit a somewhat hidden public space, without anyone apparently seeing or hearing anything critical, perhaps. The attack was incredibly swift and silent.
Or could fear
Yeah.
have silenced potential witnesses? Is it possible someone saw something but was just too terrified to come forward, considering what was done?
It's a grim possibility, isn't it? The sheer brutality involved.
Well-
It could certainly have instilled profound fear in anyone who might have witnessed even a small part of it. Fear for their own safety.
And was this a one-off? A single, terrible, isolated act? Or are there unknown connections, maybe to other crimes, perhaps crimes that haven't even been linked or remain undiscovered?
That's the question that haunts so many of these profoundly disturbing unsolved cases, isn't it? Is there a pattern we can't see? Are there other victims out there that we just don't know about?
Tristan's murder. It undeniably left a deep scar on the community of Frankfurt Hooks. That underpass where he died. It was eventually sealed off completely, bricked up.
A physical barrier, almost like trying to contain the unresolved trauma associated with the place.
Yeah, a memorial plaque. It stands there now, a silent reminder.
And it serves as just that, a constant reminder of a life taken far too soon, of questions that just hang in the air, still weighing on the community after all these years.
The grief of Tristan's father.
Yeah.
It's particularly poignant to read about. He passed away some years ago now,
Yeah.
without ever finding out who killed his son or why.
Oh, that's just unimaginable, to lose your child in such a horrific, violent way, and then to live with that gnawing uncertainty right until the end of your own life. It's a layer of tragedy that's hard to comprehend.
But the case itself, it's technically not closed. It remains open.
Yeah.
And new DNA technologies, things like familial searching, they do offer perhaps a sliver of hope.
Science keeps advancing.
Right. Cold case units, they continue to work on cases like this. And there's still a strong public interest in Tristan's case, a collective feeling that justice hasn't been done.
And those advancements in forensic science, they do provide new avenues that might not have existed even a few years ago. The dedication of cold case detectives and that enduring public memory. They are vital in keeping hope alive, however slim.
Ultimately, Tristan Bru. From everything we know, he was just an ordinary 13-year-old boy. There was no apparent reason for him to be targeted, especially not with such extreme, calculated violence. The brutal, unsolved nature of his murder. It leaves behind this profound and deeply disturbing silence.
It really underscores the frightening randomness, the sheer incomprehensibility that can accompany such violent acts. A young life just beginning to unfold, full of potential, extinguished for reasons we still can't grasp.
And in that silence, the question why just continues to echo, doesn't it? A question we certainly can't answer today, and perhaps one that might never be definitively answered.
This deep dive, looking into the life and death of Tristan Bru, it really leaves us grappling with the unsettling reality of those unanswered questions. The sheer brutality, the lack of resolution. It is profoundly disturbing.
But perhaps, by examining these difficult, unresolved cases, by remembering Tristan Bru and saying his name, we offer maybe a small measure of respect, a way to acknowledge a life that was tragically cut short.
In the absence of clear answers, we're left, really, to reflect on the complexities of violence, of crime, and the enduring pain of the unknown. It compels you, I think, to consider the fragility of life and the shadows that can sometimes exist, even in the most ordinary-seeming places.